Oh, you know
I
that.
just had to get acclimated.
You're
to
on.
it. I was covering both stores for 2 months.
The video's on.
That's a pretty big job you have, so
Yeah, so,
it's no small thing you're doing.
yeah, so we're good to go now.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing,
Good, Happy New Year.
Madam
Minnie?
Supervisor?
Oh, yeah, right? Rub it in. Definitely a case of ask what you get, what did you ask for? So, Bill, are you gonna continue to make me raise my hand like Jeff makes me do?
No, he's just going to ignore you.
Jeff does that too. Can't now.
So we don't have anyone from the township on the committee right now, do
No, and
we?
there probably won't be anybody in the foreseeable future.
All right.
Well, you have 2 supervisors.
No, I mean, township administration.
No, because there's no, the reason
That's-
that Cheryl was here was to act as a point person between 13 people and the planner. That doesn't exist anymore.
That's fine. The,
Sorry, you gotta clean
is Shannon still a member at the moment? She is, right?
Yes. And she just sent
She
an
sent
email
an
and
email.
asked that we put, you have it, but I'll remind Chris to add him to the email list, because he will be, so she actually is saying that he'll be her fill-in.
Okay, but Pam's not anymore, right?
Pam is not officially resigned. Pam is more than happy, I wouldn't take her off. She's more than happy to help in whatever way she can. She's also free if you tell me to do subcommittees again to.
Well, we got a quorum, that's good.
Well, what we'll do is, if you decide how many more members you want or need, or if you want any, we'll change the resolution to reflect the new current number, and then your form will be, then you might not need 7 to get the quorum.
Well, we got the planning commission, right?
7.
And you have 2 from the planning commission, right?
Yes.
No, okay.
Lynette and Hunter.
2 supervisors, that's fine.
And then Mark Dolinsky and Adrian, both of which aren't here for the EDAC, which doesn't really exist, it was kind of informally, I mean, technically it exists, but they're no longer meeting because it was kind of folded into this for the.
I don't know that we need any more, unless, if we want to substitute Shannon with, hey Jeff, happy New Year. With,
Shannon was somebody? Well, she said that the gentleman that, I guess he works with the planning commission, is gonna fill, with the county planning commission, is gonna fill in for her stead when available.
that's fine, if we'll leave her on the committee and we can name him as an alternate without. Okay. That's about it, right? No one else is coming. I'd like to call the January 13th, 2016 Exeter Township Strategic Planning Steering Committee meeting to order. This is our first meeting of the new year. A couple housekeeping items we're going to have to take care of, and then a bit of reorganization, and then probably the primary business that brings us here tonight, discussion of certain proposals we received, and the whole concept of the riverfront and the town center districts that we've been talking about. This meeting and all of our meetings are being televised to all members of the public who at any time are free to appear before the committee and ask any questions they may have about the scope of our work and any thoughts they may have as to what we were doing or not doing. They can either communicate by email with the township manager, who would get the emails to appropriate committee people, or they can attend our meeting, which are held on, is it the first or the second
Second
Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Second Wednesday of each month. Currently, on the committee, because there's been some replacements, are Jeff Bukowski, supervisor, myself, William Fox, Bob Quintar, William Chip White, Gary Bukowski, Jim Wanzer, Adrian Hayes, Mark Dolinsky, is that, okay, Shannon Rossman, and what's the valiant, what's this for?
Pardon me?
The other planning commission member,
I don't remember his name.
Mehmet
Oh,
Arslan.
Mehmet Arslan. I
Barmet?
thought you meant the.
Arslan, yeah.
Okay. The newest in appointee, Hunter Ayers, is it?
Aaron's.
Aaron's?
Yes.
Ahrens.
Okay. Welcome aboard, Hunter.
Thank you.
Pam Shup, right? And I think that's it. So those are the active members of the committee. We do have a quorum here this evening. I don't know if you have before you, and we just got these today, the minutes of our November 11th meeting. I'll give people a little bit of chance to read them, and then I'll ask for the approval of them later on in the meeting. I've been serving as chairman of this committee for the last year. Since this is a new year, the Township Supervisors authorized us for another year. I think it's appropriate to appoint a chairman for this year of this committee, and if anyone has any nominations, I'd ask that they be made and we can vote upon them.
Nominate Bill Fox.
Second.
Third.
Any other nominations?
Motion to close?
Motion. Second?
Second.
Closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're stuck with it.
Yeah, another year. There's really not much old business. I mean, the Simone Collins proposal and discussing that concept's going to be our major item tonight. One of the items that was before us several times in this meeting was that Oak Parkway issue and the ordinances that we talked about developing there. And we did what we wanted to do and just passed on to the supervisors. Jeff, do you know what's happened down there? Or if you don't, I think Lisa does.
Yes, this is my understanding, is that, as I recall, we passed it back to the Planning Commission to consider reviewing the NVO, whatever we called it, the new zone for that area, and possible consideration for the other neighborhood commercial and restricted office commercial areas. They came back with comments, but what we were discussing was whether or not we wanted to engage a professional to, we were talking about riverfront and this whole concept, but I think, and maybe I'm confusing the two issues. I know one of the things the Planning Commission suggested was that Great Valley Consultants, the engineer, undertake a review of certain language, but I think it was in pieces. So I'm not sure if his review was the NVO. I think Lisa may have more details on that. But my understanding, though, was that conceptually they liked the concept and then wanted to see it applied to the other villages. But that's my recollection.
Lisa, do you have further information on
I
that?
have to go to the podium.
Yeah, you should.
Lisa Van? Lisa Vanderlaan, 5560 Boyertown Pike.
Why don't you just take the microphone?
He can't keep a straight face. A couple of different things. The NBO village concept, neighborhood village concept, was taken to the planning commission by myself at the request of the steering committee in October. In November, in October there was a discussion about. In October, we asked, the planning commission was going to take that up at the November meeting, and then they scheduled also, at my request, a workshop on December 7th to discuss that. They do like the concept. They were particularly enamored with the community organization oversight committee portions of that. I explained to them that was, most of that was a concept. They also liked the business uses concept that you had, the low impact uses you had there. The steering committee also asked them to review the single color commercial area as it was. They came back with a recommendation, their comments that they came back with, that they would like to see, they would like to start with combining the neighborhood commercial and the office commercial, and they did that. I got clarification. They sent the Board of Supervisors clarification on the village, because the first letter that they sent to us did say that they wanted to overlap the village concept with the other villages. And after explaining that the current villages that we have are historical in nature, and that the NVO was to act as a buffer between more densely commercial areas and residential areas, they've redefined that. They determined that they would like to have a professional they sent the Board of Supervisors a request to have permission to hire Great Valley to do that work.
Is this just the NVO guy or all the?
All of it.
Yeah, right. And the supervisors then said, well, how much is that going to cost at our reorg? I think that was at our reorg meeting. Then at our last meeting Monday, Joe Rogoski came back with an estimate, and I don't have that sheet with me, but I think the total was about
$2,700, but that would be for a one and done. He said he had a hard time quantifying that. That would be if he wrote it, went back in, the planning commission agreed with what he wrote and got out.
My view of that is if Joe's going to do it, it should be from our end, or our recommendation, that the supervisors retain Joe and his firm to do it, so that, with guidance and more direction, so that we would get the concept that we are recommending, and then send that to the planning commission for review and comment.
And I also agree with Jeff on that, and also would request that it be requested that the NBO be broken out from the discussion. In other words, that this is not done one time, because as we all know, the NBO, for the purposes of this discussion, does include Oak Parkway, and it could take quite a while if they're combined.
Right, and so I would like to see us move on that piece right away.
Couple thoughts. The number, to me, doesn't seem that outrageous.
I agree.
I think it's a very good idea that the supervisors carry the lead, because the whole concept about what we're talking here is being business friendly, which hasn't always been what has occurred in the past. And you, as leaders of the communities and the elected officials, should, in my opinion, in this instance, it's better that you have the first look and then send it down to the planning commission for a separate review and analysis based on their expertise and their thoughts. Because they've already given us an indication that they're looking upon it favorably. And I, as a committee, I would recommend that we support what you're recommending, and that ball will now be in your court and stay in your court till we hear from it, if ever again.
Right, and what I'm thinking, and it may depend on the timing. First of all, that 2,700 was the estimate for the total piece. The NVO piece obviously should be less than that.
I'd be shocked if it's only $2,700.
Yeah, I would be very pleasantly surprised, but my thought is, maybe what Joe does is, he's directed by the supervisors to undertake that, and I think we would ask him to take what we have, put that into an ordinance that would effectuate what the concept is intended to do, and then bring it back here and to the planner steering committee for a review and comment and potential recommendations up to the supervisors.
Yeah, and I also think that separating out the NVO from the others is a good idea, because, you know, we've been talking about Oak Parkway for a long time, and we've expanded it a little, and that's good. But it'd be nice to get something done.
It would, and frankly, I think getting it done and doing it the right way, even as a small piece, my guess is, once that's done, that concept can be applied elsewhere, and it might be as simple as making that zone applicable elsewhere once it is a zone that's actually formalized and has the approval of the planning, comments from the planning commission and approval from the supervisors.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
Are we stuck somewhere on this?
No, I think originally, if you think way back when, the planning commission they were too busy and didn't want to get involved in the writing of this
Right,
ordinance.
they didn't think they had the expertise to handle the commercial.
So they set it up here to ask us to talk about it and discuss it, and there was really no one doing anything in terms of writing an ordinance. So I wrote one.
Right.
Gave
Yeah.
it to them. And, I don't profess to be an ordinance writer. I know some things
Well,
about it.
and Bill did a great job. But what the ordinance, what the portion that he worked on doesn't cover would be the things under land development and/or the saldo issues, which we don't have the expertise to
It
do. And
needs
that's what I'm gonna
refining. It
comment.
needs to make,
Just
somebody
need to be
needs to
fleshed
check,
out.
make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, and that there's no conflict between the various existing township ordinance, and that's what this engineer can do. That's fine.
So who's the expediter in something like this? I mean, who's the one that, so we're not talking about this 3 months again?
Right now, it's in, I think the supervisors have it. Jeff told me they have formulated some thoughts on it, which he just conveyed to us.
Well, no.
I don't think there's anything.
Technically, right now, the planning commission has it until directed otherwise by the supervisors. What the supervisors has is an estimate from Joe as to what it would cost to work with the planning
Yeah.
commission.
Planning commission said, supervisors, give us permission to hire Joe to do it for them to send up to us. And I'm suggesting we take it back as the supervisors. That, we'll hire Joe, and Joe can answer to do it and bring his work product to this committee for review and comment and recommendation up to the Board of Supervisors. Not that wouldn't necessarily preclude it from going to the supervisors also, but my guess is if it comes down, that the supervisors may say, well, what do you guys think? This was your concept before it's voted on. I think it makes sense, and I think that could probably happen in the span of a month. I would think by the end of February, we should be able to. At our February meeting, I would like to have this steering committee review, make any comments back to Joe, and then have it presented to the board supervisors for approval. I guess we would technically, before it's passed, the planning commission would have to.
They have to review.
So maybe we'd want it even at our first February meeting. Although it's, that's getting
Well, first of all,
ambitious.
we as a committee, I don't think are going to be meeting in March unless someone's going to chair it.
February.
Because I'm going to be
Okay.
out of state most
All right.
of, big chunk of that month.
The other thing, if I may.
But certainly by our March meeting, that could be completely
Right.
done.
It could be going to the planning commission,
And if I may interject
Right, in
something.
the-
first shop,
Right.
shop in February, and then come to us for March, then you got it
Right.
on the table.
Right.
Lisa?
And if I may interject something, one of the sticking points to answer Gary's question is the lighting ordinance, the parking ordinance, and the sign ordinance, because once again, the village concept, because it's in a commercial, part of it's like commercial, part of it's already you're talking about two different requirements, and we need clear guidance on that. That's one of the issues they're having problems with, is defining how we change the parking laning and stuff. And Joe's looking for direction on whether, again, and I don't know where that's gonna come from at this point, because it's not coming from the planning commission, on whether the township's interested in cleaning up the lighting ordinance, the parking ordinance, and the sign
Yeah,
ordinance.
well, my position is I think we should, and I think you agree, Lisa. I don't know where Chip comes down. I think Gary, in concept, is in agreement. I think it ought to be cleaned up, simplified, probably, taken back to perhaps the prior version when it wasn't such a burdensome regulatory scheme, and try and, I think that does satisfy our business-friendly objective, which is, instead of requiring a lighting plan and, lots of detailed and expensive work on businesses trying to improve their properties, the point, just take one, for example, the lighting ordinance. We're trying to prevent light pollution, and, in two ways. One, from, businesses having lights that are too bright or shining in a direction that, is in a motorist's eyes and causes, a safety issue. And then two, on neighboring properties, whether they're residential or other businesses. To me, that's all that, matters. I don't think.
The work that Joe's going to be doing on the NVO and the others is not tied to the lighting, and
Yes.
does he intend to have that done all at the same time?
Because that is the part of the land development process that normally, if you develop a property, that you have to go through. And the question is, you can't require somebody that's running an operation at the, on Oak Parkway to have the parking requirements that you're requiring Home Depot to have, or, another
No, you're
business.
clear.
And also the lighting, because you don't want to make them, in those kind of situations, because it is residential, you actually may not want them to comply as a commercial operation with the commercial lighting, because it might be intrusive, as well as the signage ordinance. So, yeah, that is the issue, is that's the stuff that needs to
Well,
be
let me ask
fleshed
you,
out in that
is he going to
language.
have that lighting and sign and that stuff done as quickly as this? I wouldn't imagine.
I think if we told them what we wanted.
Can I interject
Sure.
here? This I don't know where this belongs in this discussion, but this morning when I went to go pick up information for the Planning Commission, Jack Biddig dropped off the lighting ordinance this morning, and I think he had mentioned something to Linda that was something that we were going to be looking at on Monday. So I don't know if that ties in at all to what they're doing.
Their recommendation to Joe, I sat through the meetings, was to ask them to visit just the lighting study portion of that. In other words, retain all the language as it existed, but remove the requirement for the lighting study.
Right.
But there's issues with parking, like we require hairpin parking, questions about how much, there was one of the big discussions at the October commission meeting was, is it realistic, like, does Home Depot, like does Lowe's, to use another
It's okay.
example, need as much parking as Giant does because the parking lot's never full? Are we, because the operation is a different type of operation, and I think that's what we're getting hung up in the details.
Yeah, I think, I agree with the parking lot, that is definitely excessive in the case.
Oh, I agree.
And it could open up for future businesses, because now that parking lot is now available for
Right.
other
That's
functions, so.
Right, I think that's another example. And then the sign
It's an
one,
easy
Gary,
one.
you went through your own little
Our
thing.
current ordinance, and does each zoning district have its own parking section, or is the parking ordinance one big ordinance? I mean, how does?
For parking, each zone has, commercially has its own parking requirements.
It's based on what, the square footage?
Yeah,
Yes.
but I can't remember, and I don't have it in front of me. It has a section, each zone has a section, but does it reference
Yes.
the general parking?
In some instances it does, but there are different parking requirements for specific to different
Right.
commercial zones.
Right, right.
And that is the issue with like the NVO village, where you're gonna allow commercial operation, what do they do with the parking?
Well,
And it certainly applies to the lighting ordinance, because at the very bare minimum, if you're gonna review the ordinance, you should get rid of the study, because it's costing people tens of thousands of dollars
You
to
don't need a
comply with
study.
this.
I mean, like Jeff said, you set up your two basic requirements. You can't have glare on your neighbor, and you can't, you know.
Right.
What exactly, what's the study look like? I mean, what are you required to do?
Basically, what, I wasn't aware that there were different requirements for different commercial zones. I thought it was,
That's parking.
no, I'm talking about lighting.
Well, we were talking.
Yeah, lighting is not different, I don't think.
Lighting is
Gary.
not different, parking is different.
So
Sign-
lighting was just a formula that that guy from Electric designed and made himself a...
Rick Littlehales.
Yeah, Rick Littlehales. He made himself a little cottage industry. But anyway, it was a formula that only he could understand. And even when we put the light up, it got rejected.
And
it
then
just
fails,
became-
right? And then what happens is, they require that you put up a certain type of equipment.
Right.
They're getting the equipment, and then if it doesn't operate or it fails, normally, and the way the township is, I understand the way the township is ultimately end up handling this, is that they go out and inspect it the first time. If it fails after that, and somebody complains, but I don't think that was the case
Yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Can you tell us the expense, Gary? What?
Oh, I don't know. We probably spent, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 on Rick. And then we changed that light 3 freaking times, and it still didn't work. And we ended up yanking the light off the wall and just stuck a floodlight up there just to keep everybody happy.
And I know a couple of other local businesses, not on a large scale, that have spent $10K plus.
Yeah, it's easy to do. So the question I have is the process here. When you're going through this process, who is it up to keep it moving? Is it just up to each individual committee, and then they have to do their thing and approve it, and then it goes to the next level?
Ultimately,
It
because.
just seems like we go from committee to committee. It ends up not being anyone's job, so therefore it's nobody's job.
Right.
Well,
And I'm curious. I'm not complaining. I'm curious.
When it's
You're
come
right.
from here to the steering of the planning commission, or other than comments that he would make at the supervisors level, I was the one going to the planning commission and stuff and trying to keep things moving.
So I do think if we want to get it done, and I do as a supervisor, and if we want to as a committee, I think that's why I'm suggesting we take control of the engineer to get it done, get it to the planning commission, say, here's what we're considering. We value your input, but give us your comments, and we'll take them under consideration. I think it's gotten, you're right, Gary, it has gotten bounced around too many times, back and forth, with nobody really taking ownership. And I don't blame
To answer your question,
anybody,
I'm sorry.
but the planning commission seemed to want more guidance, and I think we can give them more guidance by saying, here's what it is we want you to opine on.
To answer your
Buy
question,
date for
it
their
could be,
opinion, you want it back by January 31st.
the municipality's planning code, really, the two prime governmental bodies that are involved in ordinances or land development, subdivision planning, and the approvals, zoning ordinances, are the planning commission and the supervisors.
For townships.
I'm sorry?
For townships. I'm sorry.
Right.
I was being
Yeah.
technical.
For the township, yes. The county has their own thing. The MPC, the planning code, sets forth how ordinances get approved, adopted, who has to review them, when they have to be reviewed, what public input you have. We've, as a committee, the process here, it's been somewhat bastardized because they're using us as a sounding board for certain things that they're considering and may not have the time to spend on it initially, and they want to get some of the thoughts from township representatives and get it fed back to them. Now, my understanding originally, the planning commission didn't want to be involved in the zoning
Any of it.
because they said they had a lot on their plate, and
And a lot of it was too complicated.
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 And we took it upon ourselves to do some things, and this NVO was one of them. I don't think we need any more discussion on this. I think Jeff's idea is appropriate. The supervisors ought to take the lead, and in hiring if it's a township engineer to do this, and it should be reported back to them, or us, or both of us, and then give it to the planning commission after the supervisor's input, and any input we may have for final input and consideration, and get this thing done. I mean, the Oak Terrace has been around for a long time.
A year and a half.
And it's, you know, and I think the supervisors, I would make a motion that the supervisors take the lead on this, as Jeff presented it here tonight at this meeting.
Second that.
If I could, can I make a motion? That's good, I'm making that motion.
I'll make the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't know if you want to vote, Hunter. You
I'll
might-
abstain.
Yeah, I don't want to throw you under the bus first meeting.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what are you, with all that, what are you sending to the supervisors, asking them to just take charge?
Supervisor's supposed to lay down the requirements to the engineer in the writing, and then have a by date to get it back to them, bring it to us for review.
Oh, on this
And then-
particular project, or
Yeah.
on this whole
Yeah.
thing?
Yes.
Project.
Because they're interrelated, so.
Will those requirements that the supervisors dictate to Joe also be sent to the planning commission, so we know where?
I think they'll be sent to
certain
you,
things will
I
be
think they'll be
coming from.
sent to you for comment and review with a time, think they'll be sent to the planning commission with, for you to comment on whether the opportunity per the MPC to comment on what's.
Yeah, I think if the product's gonna come back, we're gonna say, yes, this is what
This
we
is what we
wanted.
want.
Boom, and then
I
we'll send
mean-
it to you guys.
I mean, the direction that you give to Joe and saying that this is where we want you to concentrate. So that is going to be sent to us to comment on, and
No.
then we'll come back?
No.
Okay,
No.
that,
No.
We're
I
gonna
don't
have
think
Joe
so.
do the work, and once the work.
Once
is
the
done,
ordinance, we're gonna send you an ordinance
And say.
Yeah.
and say, here it is, we
Well,
want your comment.
I understand that part, but the piece where the supervisors are telling Joe to concentrate on these areas, like Bob mentioned in a written form, will that be forwarded to us so that we know where this is stemming from?
I will.
Changes are stemming from.
Well, you're here now, you can go back and tell the planning commission that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I want to be able to.
Really, you don't
write
need
points
it because it's gonna come back from the engineer. They're gonna say, yes, this is what we want, and you're looking for any objections that
Well,
you
this-
might have.
The planning commission has a meeting next week, so the question is, we
Oh.
want them to waste any time next week talking about this, because Joe does sit at that meeting.
Yeah, I guess if they, you know, my view is, we're not gonna be able to give him direction until the 25th.
No, which is why he could go back from the steering committee point and say, this is the discussion that was had.
Yeah, but I think that we've already given those comments. I mean, at this point, we've given him the ordinance and say, go.
Right. No, I'm saying Hunter can go back next week and relay to them that they don't have to work on this next week.
Right.
I think I understand the direction to Joe is going to be similar to what the planning commission told him, but the supervisors are going to control it.
Right.
The product is going to come back to the supervisors and then go back to the planning commission.
Correct.
We gave them an ordinance to consider it. There was some positive feedback about that ordinance. They want to expand it a little, which Joe's going to work on that and incorporate lighting and parking
Parking
and
and signs.
maybe signs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Hunter, your question's a good one to the extent you're looking for if our guidance would be helpful in the planning commission's review, but I think it's not necessary and in many ways potentially harmful, because it doesn't matter what our guidance is. You got to look at the ordinance as written, and that's your guidance. And if you think there's, you know, criticism of it, you can poke holes in it and say, this is what we'd like to see or not. It probably would be good, and I guess, you know, the guidance would be, you know, what probably comments back to the engineer from the supervisors once they see his work product. That's probably the guidance, you know, that's more important than saying, you know, get an ordinance, give us an ordinance that works.
To answer your question, no, you're not getting anything further. Is that an answer?
That's
Yeah.
an answer.
Move on to the Riverfront Town Center concepts. We had, you recall, in November, we had Simone Collins come in and make a presentation to us originally, we brought them in with the idea of, we wanted to see what they could do to develop a riverfront zoning ordinance, basically a zoning ordinance standing alone. They came in and said they thought that that was not sufficient. They wanted to do a little bit of a planning process for the riverfront in conjunction with the zoning ordinance. And they wanted to, very interested in a town center development for the Reading Country Club area. My initial comment to them was a little bit abrupt. I said, you know, if they're not interested in the riverfront alone, it was nice meeting you. We'll see you later. We talked further as a committee, and we allowed them to get back to us with a proposal, which I thought was going to include both the riverfront and a town center concept, with the cost of the planning process and the ordinance drafting process separate. Riverfront being A, town center being B. What we got back was one proposal for both zoning districts and what they would plan to do for those zoning districts. And they set forth a price which had recommended items 1 through 4 and item 7, and that had a certain price, and on top of that would be the ultimate drafting of the zoning ordinances. I think at the initial meeting, everyone had a positive impression of Simone Collins, but two things. Number one, we didn't want to get caught in a money trap. Number two, we didn't want one of these projects on the riverfront to be delayed unnecessarily because of the town center, because there were those among us who thought the town center project at the country club might have a little bit more political overtones and opposition overtones than the riverfront. We have Simone Collins' report. I know, Potter, you haven't had a chance to read it yet. I don't know, Chip, if you have. But I think we should discuss that today because we have to decide two things. Number one, are we going to make any recommendation to the supervisors relating to that report? Number two, how we feel about the report. And number three, are there any alternate considerations that we might want to discuss relating to this issue? And I have some thoughts, but I'd like to go last because I'd like to hear what the committee members feel about the Simone Collins report and about this subject generally, and then I'll offer my input as a result of my review of this. And Jeff, I don't know, do you want to start it off, or do you not want to start it off?
I don't want to start it off.
Okay.
I have some thoughts too. I'll go right before you, if that's okay.
That's fine.
A couple of thoughts I had was, going back to the meeting with Simone, was I think the other thing they were mentioning is that you want to be careful that we don't separate these two and put one in front of the other. In other words, the riverfront was probably a much harder, longer project to do than the country club, being prime real estate that's already open, available, and may be easier to work with, and may have more bang for the buck sooner than the riverfront. So my thoughts were, he had a good point in that we ought to take a look at, I forget if it's a market study or market, whatever that thing is, looking at what's doable, as opposed to what we think we'd like to see and where the bang for the buck would be. So, I mean, I like the idea of the market analysis and maybe prioritizing one over the other as being much more available, profitable, however you want to look at it, doable. And maybe the riverfront is a longer-term project. So I'm not sure where the whole thing ended up with as the rest of the township supervisors, but
Well, clearly, they didn't bifurcate them in their proposal. You can't tell from this proposal what they would do, what their charges would be for the riverfront, what their charges would be for the town center. So if we wanted, if we wanted to prioritize them, it'd be hard to do off this proposal as it currently exists, I think.
the other thing I look at is the riverfront right now is not a liability. It's existing, it's out there, but it's not costing the township money. The country club seems to be a different kettle of fish, and it's being treated as a liability. It's being treated, as opposed to being an incredible, unique piece of property, it seems like it's being treated as a tax liability and a headache. So, I mean, I look at it in terms of the way I view things. I'd love to see the riverfront developed because it's an incredible natural resource, but the country club seems to be a problem for the township, and it's caused a lot of rancor. It's, you know, it's been around and around, and it just seems to me that if we're going to spend money, that's where it should go, because it's the biggest problem on the township's plate.
Hunter, to give you a little background, part of our committee last year, the two of the bigger areas that we're looking at where we don't have the expertise in-house to do things are the riverfront and a potential town center.
So the country club one I understand.
The
Brian's
country-
my dad.
the riverfront
so
is-
that I know a little bit about.
Yeah. The riverfront is as Gary says, an excellent opportunity. You just don't have heavy manufacturing coming along rivers anymore.
Yeah.
It's not today's world. But developing riverfront, and we have a nice long stretch of riverfront, and we have a concept where one of the western part of the riverfront would be recreational, with accessory uses for whatever recreational facilities were at that end. And the eastern end by the Birdsboro Bridge would be more of your commercial, maybe some high-rise, not high-rise, but higher-rise living with the restaurants and appropriate shops and things that, destination-type things that people would want to come to, not fast food, not traditional retail. And all of this would be connected with the trail system and green areas. So be an area where people would want to come.
So would there be additional roads that would have to be built to complement?
There are
that?
probably some roads, yes.
So, just for clarification, because I don't know if everybody understood that, Brian Aaron's, Hunter's father is
The
one half of
superintendent.
A&M.
Yeah.
One half of what?
One half of A&M, the management team that
the
runs
golf
the
course.
Bullfrog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess you do understand it.
Yeah, the golf course component I understand,
Yeah.
but the riverfront was
When you're done.
helpful. Thank you.
Let me know when you're done.
Yes, there would have to be a road network, not a major one, because you don't want too many roads
Yeah.
going through there. There have to be improvements. There's definitely going to have to be a plan with a new specific zoning ordinance drafted, and we don't have the expertise here. I gave Chip a document, I can get one to you. We gave him a concept of what we thought type of uses we would like to see there,
Yeah.
what we don't want to see there, what sort of aesthetic controls you would need, because you can't let it turn into a critter's backyard. It has to be, it has to be aesthetically nice. And you only get one shot at it.
What they would be contracted to do was assess costs, create an ordinance that would help develop that property. in a way that we think is proper.
Develop a master plan and develop an ordinance, specific ordinance language, based on the directions that we've given them.
Okay.
That's where we are.
Yeah, right, and the concept you sent to Chip and you can send to Hunter, it was what Simone Collins had, part of what they had coming in. And in response to that, they said, yeah, some of this stuff it's good feedback, we know what you're getting at, some's too specific, some's, whatever, but then that's when they said, we think you need a market analysis or market study, and while you're doing that, you'd have to do the whole township, you couldn't focus it on the riverfront, you gotta do township wide, and we think one of the opportunities is a town center, so the market study could essentially kill two birds with one stone.
Okay.
you know, and so that's what they're proposing when they say the market study or market analysis in there.
When they originally talked about the market study, did they mention any other areas within the township that are interesting to them?
They said
Originally.
it would be township-wide, the market study of necessity, but that this was the most interested, the town center was the most interesting.
Originally, Simone Collins was one of the original bidders for the planning process, and they actually did it township-wide
Right,
estimate.
right.
Which we still have.
Yeah,
The only two areas of interest that they spoke of were the town center and the riverfront?
No, I'm sorry. They did, if I may, what they said was that they thought that the planning, that we were making a mistake by focusing solely on the riverfront.
Okay.
That they thought that in conjunction with that, at the minimum, which we should be looking at was a town center concept, and they felt that the most appropriate place in the township for that would be on the golf course.
yeah, and they didn't say the golf course, but they said around, you know, that it would certainly include the golf course and this building.
Surrounding area.
And the surrounding area, which obviously includes the golf
Because
course.
it's undeveloped land that we own.
Right.
But to answer your question, no, it wasn't dealing with the commercial, it wasn't dealing with the
But
BPO
that was
office.
based on our guidance, based on the riverfront, that
Yeah.
originally their concept did consider that.
But I do think their market study would enlighten us about what else should be considered here and what, you know, from a is viable here from a developer's perspective. But if you're not done, Bill, go ahead, but I had a question.
I wouldn't, Gary, you have anything else?
No, I think, you know.
Jim, you have any comments?
I wasn't there at that meeting, so.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask Gary a question to understand a little bit about, I think I did understand what you were saying, and I just wanted to ask to be sure. When you are saying the country club's a problem, I understood you to be saying that it's an area of controversy, and its future has been the subject of discussion, and that spending some money analyzing the possibilities, if you will, and then having a discussion and debate about those. Were you saying you think that's worthwhile to do now so that we can resolve the issue one way or another going forward? I wasn't sure if that's what you were saying as far as a problem or what you thought, how you thought it ought to be addressed.
Okay, a couple of things. When I use the term problem, I think of the term of revenue versus cost,
Right.
and what is it doing for the township?
Right.
So from what I understand about that whole enterprise there is it's break even at best, and costing the township in order to keep open space, keep the golf course running. Am I right? Or am I, okay. So in terms of the township's revenue, it's not helping. So that's where I think if I were to pick a priority, I would start there and see what is viable, what's possible, what could be done better than how it's being handled now.
Mhm.
Maybe it can't, I don't know.
Right.
But until we ask the question, I don't know how we'd ever find out.
And I like where you're going, Jeff, because that is always a controversy over what can we do with the property, or what's the value of the property, or what can we do, you know, and it might settle a lot of that controversy, because we might find it's a good, you know, possibility, or we might find that there are other things that we need to focus on, like
Right.
the riverfront.
And I did recently meet with Brian and Tom, as did Lisa, and, you know, we talked, you know, there are other ideas about, you know, is it possible, are there things they could do differently with our, you know, support that, you know, to run it more efficiently or differently, that it does make, you know, from a revenues perspective, it makes more money, or doesn't lose as much money. In some sense, my own view is it's somewhat unfair to judge the property. You know, everyone says, well, you paid whatever it was, 18 million for it, and that is true, whatever the exact number is. That is certainly true. And I remember Pat Mascaro at one of our early meetings, even raising this issue, was if you look at it from, and there's a debt associated with that, and if you judge it from the debt service, it will never be profitable. And it can't be, because you overpaid for it. Nobody in their right mind would have paid $18 million for a golf course. But really that money represented was and I wasn't involved in the decision to purchase it or the eminent domain proceedings, but, ultimately, a court determined that was the market value or the fair value for it to be taken, and that was to prevent, several hundred townhomes from going in there, which would have had its own associated huge negative cost to the community and the school district and putting stress on infrastructure that way. So what Pat said, and I agreed at the time, and I still agree, is that you have to look at the golf course and the country club, building, restaurant, banquet facility, and it's hard to look at them together, but, in an operational way, and judge them against, other operations, and are they doing what they should be doing for what they are? And then, I do think it's appropriate to weigh those, that review against other possibilities that a market study would bring to the table and say, here are other possible uses that we've determined that, that these folks, outsiders, professionals, undertaking the process that they're proposing, so, having talked to developers, that we think these are 2 or 3 or however many possibilities. Here are pros and cons of each of them, and then weigh those and have public discussion and debate about what the township residents would like to see going forward. Because and I've never said I'm in favor of keeping it golf course open space at all costs and against, regardless of what any evidence has, would show. But I do think it is an important and unique piece of property, and, that does have a lot of, is a political hot button, and I don't think we can do anything hastily. I don't think we can, I do think whatever is going to happen does need vetting by professionals like Simone Collins and adequate public discussion, so nobody gets surprised about, what's coming down the pike, if whatever direction the township may go. And frankly, I think if we decided tomorrow we were going to do something new with that property or allow that property to be developed in a certain way, that's not going to happen overnight, and it may not happen for years. So I think we need to look for ways to support the current operations as much as possible to make them as profitable as possible while they still are what they are. So that's
I don't have any disagreements with that at all.
Yeah, okay.
And
I'm not
I
arguing.
think Jim,
Was that before Bill?
Yeah,
Jim and I were both on that subcommittee that we had
Yeah.
early on about the Reading Country Club, and one of the things that we were talking about and thinking about was, what is there that draws people to the country club? I mean, you're either there to eat, or you're there to play the golf course, but it's not treated as a resort type of place. It's not a destination.
Agreed.
Right? So, I mean, our thought was, is to see if there's a way to turn that into a destination, whether it's some sort of hotel / convention center,
right.
concert venue, whatever. And to turn it into more of a destination type of operation as opposed to this piecemeal, you play golf or you're there to eat.
Right.
Well, it could be a combination of things. I mean, I know there was talk about a hotel and a conference
Yeah.
center with the golf course as part of it.
That's right.
And the existing
Think-
restaurant or food venue.
And it can still be an 18-hole golf
Right.
course.
There's
And you can actually, there's enough property there to
There was also
actually
talk
section it out.
making a complete town center, which would
Right.
eliminate the golf course,
Right.
but, and Jeff said, we don't have the answer. We really need to look at one, we need to consider both options, but I think the general consensus is that it would be better, even if you wanted to maintain the golf course, if you could bring some sort of economic development in there, be it a hotel, be it
Right.
whatever. Or some people, and a large number of people, feel a town center concept, I know Simone Collins does, would be better.
Well, Bill, just to, let me clear my throat here. Last year, when I ran for supervisor and then I won, one of the things that, and Elisa and I had talked about it, was the country club, the debt service, and the profitability. And I get all the reasons why we did it. I mean, I lived here when we bought it and understood why we did it, and it was a better alternative than letting 500 or 700 condos be built over there. But I thought, to me, that the idea of the town center, I thought might make sense because it is a great piece of property. It's on a busy highway. It's got a lot of value from a commercial standpoint.
And the township owns it.
And I know that sounds evil, when you look at this big open space, but from my perspective, I don't know that it's fair for the residents to say, you're going to keep paying this $18 or $17.5 million debt, and it's going to benefit, a limited amount of people who like to golf. To
Right.
me, it doesn't seem right, and it's not, I don't think, I think if I'm representing the bulk of the taxpayers, I don't think that that's fair to them. I talked to some guys, I've worked with Berkey Construction. I didn't actually know about the Simone Collins report at the time, but I talked to the guys at Berkey because I use an architect over there for our business, and I know Rick McDougal, and I was talking to my architect, and I explained, what do you think about the concept of the town center? And with that, McDougal called up and wanted to come over and talk to me. So I said, well, I haven't even been sworn in or anything, but anyway, we talked about it, and Rick has got, I don't know much about Simone, but McDougal has got a lot of connections, and mentioned to me there's currently 3 hotels that are looking for locations in the county, and he's worked with all 3. Hilton Garden Inn is probably the nicest of the 3, and in his mind, this project be a perfect location for a hotel.
Yeah.
And they're out there right now, and they're looking for ground. Point number 1. I think, from my perspective, to develop that property, to put in things that would benefit the value of properties in this township, I think could be a good move. I think a hotel could be a good move. I think to get a supermarket like a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods or even a Wegmans could be a good move. I think to put in some restaurants, maybe mix in some municipal uses, could be, we could end up with a center of our township that's vibrant and it benefits everybody. And the benefit would be that if we develop this property and we begin to sell off pieces of property, acreage at whatever price, $100,000 an acre, or maybe up to $200,000 an acre, which is what they got out at Spring Ridge for the Target Center, we could begin to whittle down that $17 million in debt. We'd also add properties to the tax base. If we could get this parcel developed and put in, let's throw out a number, $50 million assessed value of commercial property. Could bring about $1.5 million to the school district every year, $150,000 a year to the township. So that, to me, is, from a financial standpoint, a better alternative than where we're at now, which we're about 800,000 in the hole. And I think a golf course is a difficult business to run. I don't really know of any that are wildly profitable. I mean, the ones that I know, they're all, struggling for members, and, it's declining because people have less and less recreational time, and they have less time to golf. And so that business, to me, is not really in an upswing. So I've talked to Berkey, like I said, they would love to come in and do a proposal. I think what they bring to the table, maybe over a Simone, is that they could actually see this thing through if everyone thought it was a good idea, if the residents liked the concept, that they could take it from an idea to something real that helped our debt issue, that increased our taxes, our tax revenue. And
You're talking about the town center at this point, right?
I'm talking about a town center, yeah.
Right.
So to bring this back to where this all started with
Yeah.
you, Bill, is, this proposal, whether we use Simone or somebody else, could we prioritize, putting more emphasis on the town center and the riverfront as secondary?
I agree with you, there should be prioritization. And I also agree with you for immediate bang for your buck. You have a better chance probably at the town center than the riverfront.
Before you
Go ahead.
weigh in on everything, I mean, getting back to the original question, if nobody else has
Well, I'd
comments,
like to-
before
yeah,
you,
you're
because
right.
I think Bob
Do
was
you have
still
something?
down.
Well, I think they're charging too much. And our initial concept was that they were going to take care of the writing, and then they sold us the market study. So,
Yeah, I think the market study is a very valuable piece.
Also, they're not expensive, I think, I don't know, I don't.
Yeah, it is broken, I don't know how it's broken
well,
down. But,
get it to the
yeah,
point where it is.
it was only 14,000 for the market analysis. But my view of it is, I think step 4 is really along the lines of what Chip was describing, the master plan concept for the riverfront and town center, whether you cut out riverfront or don't. I wouldn't be opposed to hiring Simone Collins to do that. I don't know that we need to decide that now. I wouldn't be opposed to hiring Berkey or somebody else to do it, and maybe both compete, competitive, views, different ideas from different perspectives. My thought on now is that maybe we do 1, 2, and 3, and 7, 7 being meetings with us, to get the market analysis and find out what that says, get feedback from us before embarking on a master plan concept, before this group knows what the market analysis says, and then gives, then we could, have questions, give direction, or whatever. I mean, that might change people's view, but I wouldn't necessarily go whole hog into that item 4. But I do think we should have, I'm open to other suggestions, but that's how I look at it. And I'm not saying we wait, and it might be a seamless process that we get to the end of that and then we say go ahead with master plan concept. But I think even if Berkey were going to do it, they'd want the market analysis and.
May I say one thing, Bill, before you make your comment?
Sure.
Was it I'm sorry, Jeff, because I think it was at the supervisor, was it your recollection that Simone Collins said that they were not interested in doing just the riverfront portion? Because the
Yeah.
question here
Yes.
was, right, the question here is, are we going to go back and tell them we want to separate this? And I remember clearly this company telling us they weren't interested in just doing the riverfront. Is that correct?
Yes, they said you really can't do that, and if you're going to do a market analysis, you can't separate it,
Their opinion was, right, their opinion was that a riverfront community can't be supported by anything else in this township. It's too far away unless you're looking at this as part of a bigger
Right.
picture. That was my recollection. I just
Right.
like you to keep that in mind while you're talking about separating this, because you could sit here for an hour and talk about separating it, but if they don't want to do the work, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to separate it either. I mean, while they're in the process of doing something, I think I think one would flow with the other,
But
perhaps.
we never asked the reverse question, was would they be interested in just a town center?
I think that's, yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Gary. But my sense was they would have said, well, do it both. The market analysis isn't going to change one way or the other. You're going to get
I
the
actually
whole
think what they
thing.
were telling you point blank, the short answer to that is yes, they would do just a town center,
Yeah.
because my impression is that's what they want you to do. They thought they were adding the riverfront in to keep everybody in this committee happy.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right.
That's true.
That was they didn't say that, and we didn't ask that, but I would agree with that comment.
If that's the case, I'd like to hear what Berkey has to say.
I have a couple thoughts on the proposal. I would still, the market analysis has to be done, period, regardless of whether you're doing one or both. And the market analysis would be good for both. It would just have different impact on the district.
To add to that, couldn't it also have impact on any potential project that the
Sure.
township considers
Yeah.
anywhere?
Right.
Absolutely. I think this number, I agree with Bob, I think the number is high. When we considered the thing they gave us back in 2013 was only 100,000. And they told us,
For everyone.
they told us that a lot of the public informational stuff we've already done, they wouldn't even have to do that. But when you add up all these numbers, it gets to $90,000 when getting your ordinances drained, by the time you get your ordinances
That's
drained, and that's a minimum. So I don't know that, I don't know that they sharpened their pencil as much as they need to. I I personally would still like to see two proposals, whether, what order they go. I'd like to see the riverfront, I'd like to see the town center, and right in the middle, you could put the market analysis, because it's needed for both. We know we're spending the 14G. And we might decide, okay, we agree, do we want to see the town center first, and then they would do the project. If we said we want to see the riverfront first, maybe they wouldn't do the project. There might be, what Chip's saying here, there's another potential vendor here that might be able to give us a proposal, whether that person, I don't even know who it is, but if that person's interested in the town center and the riverfront, fine. If they're only interested in the town center, that's fine too. It would be better, it's always better if you have more than one thing to consider.
Right.
And I don't think we should approve this proposal as it, or recommend it to the supervisors as it's been presented to us. I'm not going to get into it, but I have a number of questions about their legal terms. They want to basically get out of everything and have no responsibility for the nature and quality of their work. But that can, these are standard terms that appear in a lot of consulting agreements, and they, people like me X them out, and if they want the business, they'll, be accountable for what they do. And they're a reputable outfit, there's no doubt about that.
Right.
So I don't think, I won't recommend that this be approved by the supervisors in its present form. I think we should go back to Simone Collins and say, listen, we understand where your interest lies, but we would still like you to break this out, riverfront, town center, put the 14,000 for the market analysis right in the middle, because we understand that's going to have to be done. And
Before Lisa comments, Bill, do you agree that the market analysis might affect what direction we decide to go next? In other words,
I was going to get to.
okay,
Yeah, because you were basically saying do 1, 2, and 3,
right,
pause, take a breath,
yeah,
see what they say. Well, we might say, well, geez, this really leans towards the town center, or this really leans towards the riverfront. I think it's really all part of the same process. I think their proposal could be the same, but we could say, before you start on your strategic plan, we want to talk to you about your market analysis.
Right, exactly.
But I also think that if there's another potential source of ideas out there, or someone that's interested in, whether it's the town center or the riverfront, and they want to put together a conceptual proposal like this for our committee. Again, we're not bound by any bidding requirements or any RFP requirements. We're just a ad hoc committee. We can do what we want to do, and then we can pass it on, and then once it gets to supervisors or planning commissions, they have certain statutory requirements that they must adhere to. But basically, I consider this informational gathering, and if we can gather some more information from another potential source, I would recommend we do that. If there is that potential source and you have the contact, Chip.
What is that, in March, the next meeting?
In March, this next meeting, if they can have something,
I can get them to do a presentation, yeah.
yeah, if they could come back with something in a presentation.
And do we want Simone to come back with a revised one at the
Yes.
same time?
Yes.
Yeah.
We should go out
I
to them
think
and
we
ask.
should.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
What you just said is what should be done.
And while you're asking for that, my impression, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this wasn't like a menu option on this RFP.
No.
That was two things, that was a breakdown of what their overall cost was. They may not be interested in doing 1, 2, and 3 for that price if 1, 2, and 3 is all they're doing, number one.
Correct.
And number two, I think that you have to bear in mind, if you do this, that I don't think we're talking apples to apples here. I think Simone Collins is a planning company. They're gonna come in, they're gonna give you the concept, they might give you the ordinance. And I think what Chip is speaking about is a company that can do that and follow through the concept to actually get you a product on the street. So,
Well, I think they have enough connect, I mean, they would work with, Stephen Jarian is talking with them, and McCarthy Engineering, and I think that I know they've already got 3 hotels that they say are looking for property in the county, and I know Rick's got a lot of connections with different,
I think you're right, Lisa. One's an apple, one's an orange.
exactly.
It doesn't mean
and what I'm
they're
saying
both not worthy of
is
consideration.
that you have to bear that in mind. Number one, if you're looking at asking for a revised or, something with the RFP here, exactly what the real end game run is here, because you're going to be, I sense, and I could be wrong, that these are going to be 2 vastly different things.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I wouldn't be surprised, and I think that might be a good thing. I wonder whether or not we might still want the market analysis for our own purposes, whether or not it would, and certainly once it's done, it would be available to whatever professionals we wanted to, give it to, and the Berkey team may say, hey, yeah, well, that's helpful to us too as we go forward. We can give you more detail on that now that we know some of that. So, I mean, I don't see picking necessarily one and riding it all the way through.
I agree, I think that would be money well spent.
Yeah.
For how big this
Well,
would
plus
be.
we'll know what the difference is between apples and oranges after your people do their presentation. I mean, we know what
Yeah.
Simone's
But
are.
yeah,
breaking it
I guess
down.
I mean, the only question is whether we would say, and if they would do it, to say, do the market study.
Your point
and have it
was,
by
Lisa,
market.
these are professionals without the project behind them. This may be a professional people working with potential.
With project in mind.
With the ability to put it on the street.
Well, that's
number one.
good.
And number
That's
two,
not bad.
I think that if you're going to ask that, and it's good to have guidance come from you guys as to, with your experience, with your input, then maybe the discussion here this evening should be focused on what it is you'd like to see so that he can give guidance for that, because the guidance that for what this company's going to do, I suspect is different than the guidance for what you give just a straight up planner.
Yeah, no, but I think what I heard Chip saying is that they have certain relationships and are aware of developers who are interested in doing certain projects, and they would look at this particular piece of property for that concept
Right.
or
Yeah.
related concepts, or in the process, if they figured out something
Here's
that,
my thought.
even better.
Simone might come up with a plan, they might come up with a proposal.
Right, and they might say, hey, you know what, I love that
Which
idea,
will
and I know the people
incorporate
who
that.
could actually do it.
Well, they'll come up with tenants, I think.
Yeah,
I know they have-
exactly.
The hotel was looking at the auto place up here by Target, that track, they were gonna tear that down, so.
My guidance to whoever you're, what's the name again?
Berkey.
Berkey, heck, I don't. My suggestion would be, I'd like them to consider looking at this country club property and maybe with two potential ideas. One with a hotel or something similar like that, conference center where the course gets preserved, and the other with a town center where, more of a type of town center we're thinking about, where you have very upscale restaurants, you have some high-rise living or something, but not single-family homes. You have entertainment venues, you have open space. What a town center.
So you want a proposal for those two alternatives, but you'd like them to come in March and talk about.
Yes.
I mean, as much as we can get out of them for free, we'd like them to.
Yeah.
The other thing that we talked about is it possible that you could find a suitor who would do the market study for the township rather than us? I mean, if somebody's going to put up money to do something this big, you'd think they would have.
Well, here's my thought.
They would have the horses to-
I don't know this guy, I've never met this outfit, but my suspicion is the numbers they come back to us with, what they're considering, are going to be a lot less than what these numbers are, because these guys are doing it with the idea that there's a project to be had here. These guys are doing it strictly from a planning concept, which is, the end result is the dollars they get for their plan. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't disagree.
And that's not bad.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think, Gary, from I think that's a very good comment. Although I would say, for me, I'm always suspicious of somebody who comes in with a project in mind and then gives you the market study to go along with it and saying, I can support it, as opposed to have somebody not have a project in mind and tells you, this is what I mean, and I guess you could say, but there are pros and cons, because one, I guess the person's going to put their money where their mouth is.
Right.
On the other hand, if I'm saying I'm a fiduciary for the township and its residents, do I owe it to them to get my own independent market study so I can, make decisions on that?
You're going to decide who's going to do what after you hear both sides.
Right.
If I would remind the committee, and again, Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong, prior to them coming here, when the supervisors asked Stone and Collins to do this, they made it clear, as I recall, that they were not interested in becoming part of a competitive process again. So maybe this is approached as not an either-or project. And it has to be relayed that way, because I'm sure that it will be up.
And I agree with you, Lisa. I mean, it could be
Exactly.
something that someone Collins does, and then the Berkey team still says, you know what, we'll run with it, and we've got the connections to make it happen. I mean, I'm not saying,
No, I'm just saying, for the sake of the discussion of what you're having, is to remember that I believe, and again, correct, like I said, that they weren't interested in becoming, they didn't give you this proposal as something to compete with somebody with. This was us coming back in and them asking us asking them to help.
right, and I think that's right.
And again, under the second-class township code, professional consulting service contracts or professional service contracts don't have to be bid.
Right.
So I think when it does get to the supervisors, you don't have to go through a bidding process, because this is,
Right.
you want to pick the person or company you're comfortable with, not necessarily the low dollar bid.
Agreed.
Can I jump in here real quick? One of the things that's coming up to me, and, take this with a grain of salt, because I've heard about the country club and where the whole situation has come to so far from my dad, who is a party to that. But isn't part of the reason that and this goes to what you said, Gary, about how you're either going there to eat or you're going to play golf, right? So one of the things that I believe is being tried new is leasing the building to Viva, who has already put in considerable amount of money to invest in the the property and trying to figure out if there's a different way to do things. So, I mean, if that's, and it's my recollection that that's what the township supervisors wanted to do by trying to change it up a little bit and see if we could do something different, that because it wasn't working before. So, in my mind, especially with, and I know that this isn't something that's all come to a consensus on, but especially with site reconnaissance for number 2, it almost, in my opinion, would seem to the Reading Country Club staff, as well as Viva staff, that they're just a dead man walking and we want to switch them out. And, I mean, I understand that's not what we're doing, but to them at the same time, when it's their job and their project that they've just put money into on an 18-hole golf course, we're basically saying to them, well, that's not guaranteed anymore, right after they've just gotten in. So,
I think actually, I mean, a town center, I mean, what I would envision might also be, you know, over 55 residential, maybe apartments like you have at 100 Park where you've got professionals. So the school district doesn't have a tremendous burden. So in terms of foot traffic, there could be a lot of foot traffic up there. People going there and Friday night, what do you want to do? Let's go to the town center. And the people that live there are coming home after work. So, you know, I think Viva's business model is let's do weddings because it's this big, beautiful building. It's just like Stokesay Castle, which doesn't have a golf course. But the advantage would be that Viva's going to have a ton of foot traffic if we do this right. If we put a Trader Joe's, and imagine how many people from
well, that's
county
if a Trader Joe's will
would-
come, too.
If
Or
they would.
or a hotel. I mean, a hotel has an.
I'm an optimist.
You're right, but consideration has to be given to Viva because they've invested time. I don't think anyone's talking about knocking down that existing.
And no, I understand. And
Integrated,
what,
and they've got a contract.
But you're right.
and the end point at what I'm getting at is why would we look for a developer especially to start coming onto the site, or even a planner to start coming onto the site to dictate what's going to be done? I think that if we just looked at a market analysis and looked to see if anybody else wanted to do that and say to ourselves, well, this is genuinely the route that we want to go down because the market is there for that, I think that would be a better option to start with rather than going to site reconnaissance for either a developer or a planner and dictating the fate before it's even been decided. And
You're putting too much emphasis on the site reconnaissance. This is long-term planning for the welfare of the community, well beyond the Viva contract, well beyond any of this. So this is doing what we should be doing, not sitting back and waiting to see what Viva does and then say, oh, geez, let's come up with a new idea. This is, nobody said Viva's not going to be integrated in it.
No, not at all.
Nobody said, you know.
And I understand that's not the end that you're getting at, but, you know, how much will they want to continue to invest if they think that that product is going to change? And I think one of the reasons why they wanted to go to the country club,
How much who would want to invest?
Viva, continue investing into what they already have.
Yeah, but I do think they know going in, or they should know, that anything and everything could happen to the rest of that property. They have a lease, they will expect the township to honor it.
The township has certain obligations. and they-
Well, yeah, I understand that as well.
Their investment will be amortized by the time that lease is up.
Also, I think the site reconnaissance, if you read what they're talking about, basically they're talking about looking at the property, get a feel for the property. It's not a gigantic scope of their work. And I agree with you, and Jeff brought it up, there may be reason to pause after the market analysis before you authorize any strategic master plan to be developed, because, you know, maybe it won't make sense, or maybe you might have changed your thoughts on the plan.
And that goes to my second endpoint, which is, would it be a good idea at this point to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they start thinking about a market study to pay for, and possibly even looking for other people who are willing to do that? Because one of the other concerns is if Simone Collins came and wanted to argue for making sure that this town center is included, and they were kind of just doing the riverfront to make everybody happy, then does that mean that the riverfront's going to get 2 pages of this report and the MUTC is going to get 30 pages? Do you know what I mean by that? So, like, if they think that this is what we should do, then they might reflect that in that report in the long run anyways. No matter what the results from another company would have been, or even some organization from the state to study the economics of the area.
We've already done a portion of what you're talking about. We had the competitive bid on the study, just like Simone Collins is going to do.
So are they the competitive bid, just to clarify? I'm not sure
Another-
about that point.
Another company won the bid,
Okay,
Originally,
and we found their product to be not to meet the needs. So then we asked Simone Collins to come back. So we're in the midst of this, deciding what we're going to do, since the first arrangement did not work out. So to go back to the supervisors and say, hey, get ready, we don't want to do that.
okay.
In reality,
for
it's-
clarification
yeah.
purposes, it was the supervisors, me, that said that I thought that the market study was the thing that we should come back and look at. So this has already been at the supervisors' level.
So
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we try and get them to our, maybe not our next meeting, but a subsequent meeting to, maybe even in February, if we, and that was another question that I had. Can we have a meeting in February?
Sure, you have a meeting.
I mean, is there somebody willing to chair the meeting, like you said at the beginning?
Yeah, but
Jeff's a good chair.
Yeah, if we want to have a
Because
meeting.
is
then
it
we
possible
need a
for
meeting.
them to come back to us in February, or see if they want to come back in
For
February?
what purpose?
To talk about a different proposal as opposed to what's here, including the master plan concept and numbers 5 and
I
6.
think if we give them the direction we want them to go, not having a meeting next month gives Berkey the time to put together a presentation. Then we get to analyze the response from Simone and the presentation from Berkey, and then we can move forward.
I think that there's a little bit of confusion here.
I might be
You
confused.
weren't, so you weren't part of this, and it's understandable that you don't know, but the township gave Simone Collins, by reaching out to them, very specific guidance of what they were looking for. Simone Collins came back and said, we're not interested in doing that, this is what you need to do. So, I mean, obviously, all things are subject to change. I mean, maybe they've changed their mind in the last 2 months, but
Well, I mean, if we're not ready to go down the route of 4, 5, and 6, then don't we want to see what their next proposal would be? And it doesn't have to be in
That's what
February.
Bill's gonna-
Well,
That's what we're
I
going to ask.
think, I think we ought to ask them to just
Break it down.
reformat this, so you can, it's not one big lump sum, it's riverfront, town center, with the understanding the market analysis is going to be done regardless.
and then you're gonna clarify if they're interested in doing that in piecemeal or an entirety, or if they're interested in separating it at all.
Well, I thought they didn't want to separate it at all.
Well, I think if
Gary
they-
said they
if
might
they
be
thought-
interested in the town center
That they
standing
might-
alone without the riverfront, but they're not interested in the riverfront without the town center. It could be.
Well, wouldn't they
And they might be
emphasize any
interested
areas
in
of
doing-
development?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't they emphasize any areas of development? So, I mean, even if the riverfront is
Their-
not what they would
their-
see as
Their
development.
opinion was that the riverfront was not supportable without a bigger picture development plan in there. That's what they expressed in here very strongly.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's what they
Right,
did say that.
Okay.
I agree with Bill. That is what they
I think
said.
riverfront development is a hot item right now, quite frankly. Maybe town center could be done quicker, with quicker results.
I'm not
But
speaking
it's certainly-
That is, that's
And I
definitely what they
understood
said.
that too as well.
But the other pieces, I view them as having separate purposes too. I view Simone Collins more of an advisor to this committee than a developer, you
They
know.
clearly are different.
Yeah, so I think they have two purposes. We had a planner, and if we still had that planner, I certainly think I would want to have them listen with us to whatever Berkey would present and say, geez, that's something that we hadn't thought of, and we've seen that somewhere, and we can help, formulate that too.
Well,
We
you
have
know,
some
I
calls
think,
come in
I think
with
we need to
Berkey.
hear from Berkey, whatever it is.
Right.
And I think we need to get some clarification from Simone Collins, and who knows, maybe the two will get married, have a good project or something. But there's nothing wrong with looking at an apple and an orange to try to get to the same result, fruit salad.
And I want to clarify that I'm not opposed to the country club being changed. I don't have those conversations because that would be a point to where I would want to recuse myself.
I don't think it matters, honestly. This body has no authority whatsoever, and
Yeah.
everybody knows where everybody's coming from.
But on that token,
worried.
I would rather just take slight steps, because my other concern would be is that if you change the golf course, especially to not include 18 holes, then that's going to permanently change it. And I don't know if you could ever go back from that. And that's a unique item that the county has, especially a public course like the RCC is.
Well, let me say this, Hunter. We had about 18 to 24 months of agony with the first go-round, the first planners. And we didn't take baby steps. We took microscopic steps. It was torture. And we know now, as a body, that the two potential areas where we need help, but could have a good economic benefit to this township, are the riverfront and this town center. And with all due respect to baby steps, we're looking for, at least I am, for a little more than baby steps. It doesn't mean these are just people coming to us with ideas. We might say, well, you're nuts, that's too big a leap. And we also wanted to hear from a development, a potential idea that would include keep the golf course. Your committee right at the beginning thought hotel conference center was a good viable use for that property. And maybe that's where it'll end up.
Plus, the other thing we're after here is information.
Yeah, we're only looking at
We're
information.
gathering information. We're not saying this is what's going to happen. We're just trying to
And
gather
that's the benefit
some
we
advice.
have over the supervisors, because people get in, they man all those seats, and they start giving them crap about stuff, and we're just a committee. We have no power, no authority, and we don't have any money.
I'm sitting in the front row to hear to give you crap.
Yeah, we got the public comes in.
So I think any information we can gather that would be helpful to the supervisors in ultimately making a decision is worth looking at. That's all.
And I completely agree with you. I'm just concerned about some of the steps, which it sounds like you don't want to take anyway. So maybe I'm saying things to just talk.
You're a good buffer to have on the committee. So
I think we need a little less talk and a lot more action.
could you talk to your people so that they can have
set
some?
it up.
Jeff, this letter was to you. Do you want to write back? I'm leaving town on Friday.
Yeah, give me some guidance. I'll say, yeah, I can give them guidance.
I think we ought to ask them, we appreciate the proposal. We'd like them to detail it a little more. We'd like to know, and we'd like to see the riverfront costs and the town center costs bifurcated, with the understanding that their $14,000 market analysis is a given. Then we need to know, we should ask them, do you have an interest, whether they have an interest in the riverfront standing alone?
Clarification.
Clarification. Do they have an interest in the town center standing alone? Both of which would include the market study. You might also, and I don't know, do you know these guys personally?
No, but I've met them only through the prior meetings and.
If this process goes through the whole cost projections, it's going to be a minimum $90,000, where their last proposal, with actually more, they were doing more work, was only $100,000.
Can you sharpen your pencil?
Yeah, we thought the cost might have been a little high. Could you take a look at it?
Yeah,
Do you want another copy of their letter for yourself?
I have it.
Oh, you got it right there?
So do you think they put these items 1 through 7 in the order of priority to them? Like, they're not going to do 3 without doing 2? Because, like you said, Bill, site reconnaissance, What's the value, I mean, does that have to be done before they can?
Well, they're gonna get an aerial photo of the site, they're gonna see, I mean, they're gonna look at it.
I think they did it as not a priority, but from a project manager standpoint, those go first. And then they described it, but I think they gotta come in here, do
So
some,
you couldn't do a market analysis without doing site reconnaissance and background information? That's my question.
um,
I mean, are you on the hook for 1 and 2 before you get to 3?
Well, site reconnaissance.
I view it as part of the background
You walk
for
the
it.
property, you take a couple hours and you walk the property.
And
You
you
look at
review
the
the
aerials and you look at the
graphics.
topography.
I sort of look at the whole market analysis price as not 14,000, but really
That's what they would propose.
14 and 14, you know, I viewed it as the 56 and the 4280 plus 14, honestly. I think they broke that down into different pieces. I can find out.
Like you said.
To keep it, they get into the cost of the infrastructure, which I think, I mean, you gotta know what it's gonna cost to do your infrastructure. I mean, that's part of the whole, how much am I gonna get out of the property?
Yeah, and there's a couple ways to do it. There's whether the township would develop it or
Yeah.
just sell it off, you know, lock, stock, and barrel, and let the
Yeah.
developer, you know, worry about that. I mean, we could debate which is the better way. I think, you know, probably developing it, you know.
I think the longer you stay in, the more you'll make.
I agree.
Just like, oh,
I
just
could-
buy the whole tract, we're not gonna make anything.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the question would be, hey, if you said, if you took the debts, if you paid off the debt,
Yeah.
you know, maybe that's all you care. But I think maybe if you're really looking to do the best for, you know, you stay in longer. I don't disagree
Build
with
the
that.
road, subdivide and sell lots off
Right.
to developer A, developer B.
Absolutely.
You gotta meet our architectural
Right.
guidelines and,
Right, then you have more control.
yeah.
Yeah, if they could come to our March meeting with, you know, maybe fill in a little bit of narratives
I'll
on
have them
these.
do pictures and I'll make them.
That'll be fine.
I'll make them get to work.
So, and that's for the March meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want
That's-
to do
that-
a February meeting?
Is there something to do?
I won't be here, so if you want, that's fine. If you want to have a meeting, if there's anything to meet about, I don't.
Unless we're gonna bring Simone Collins back in just to talk, I don't see the advantage. to
I
it.
don't think they're going to come back in for another chit chat.
The other
Yeah.
idea possibly is we can have a discussion about the other major portion of this, which was the BCO flex.
I think that,
I don't know how, I mean, you would certainly be helpful in that portion of the conversation.
yeah.
If the committee is of mind that they want to handle that, because I have my own thoughts on how I would handle it.
Well, under new business, I was going to ask where we want to go with BCO Flex in trying to get that moving. You originally had some thoughts, Lisa, when you were on the committee. Personally, I believe that we know enough about the BCO Flex, where it's going to be and what it entails in terms of, it's basically drafting a new zoning, not a new zoning ordinance, but a BCO Flex ordinance.
I have about 90% of that done already.
Yeah,
Okay, well,
and it does seem that can be handled through this committee then, and the planning commission.
Well, if
right?
you have something that's.
No, I'm just saying, we would do it, send to the supervisors and say,
I would handle that, I would, if it was left to me,
Yeah.
if I was going to do the work, I was going to do the work, present it to the supervisors, get their approval of the concept, and then it could be sent back to here or to the planning commission for comment.
You say you're 90% done?
I've got it. The only thing that we have to work out, number one, is land uses and having a discussion with the landowners that are out there, what they're interested to do, and the conversation with the form zoning or the aesthetic portion of it, so that we're creating, and I've been going through the case law that you provided, but so that we're creating an entrance aesthetically, you know, to what we want that, you know, entrance on the eastern portion of the township to look like. The only holdup again there is the parking, lighting, and signs.
Well, you're not going to make that. You're not drafting that into your ordinance. That has to be
No, but that's.
addressed township wide.
Correct. Unless the ordinances were to continue the way it was, and then I was writing it in such a way that it would have a separate,
Well, you could
Consideration.
create a new zoning district that would have its own lighting
that's
ordinances.
right, that's what I was waiting to see, what everybody was gonna do with the other one, to see if that amount of work, because that's not a small task.
No, that is not. You mean creating lighting, no, that's, you need some little professional
Because this-
input.
But we couldn't really cover that in the meeting next week, or next month. We're trying to decide whether we
Right.
want a February meeting.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And I only asked because I thought that they would want to come back and give a new proposal, but if that's not the case,
No,
then
they were-
that was my reason.
I don't think they're really interested in coming back again.
Yeah, I think they would
I think
send
they
us a new
respond to the
proposal
letter.
after I do that, and if they respond, they may respond before February, which I would think they would, and we could discuss it then too, if they do.
And if the committee would prefer, I can present in March or April, April, if we want to wait that long, the concept that I've developed for that, and then get your stamp of approval and your comments, or your stamp of disapproval and your comments.
Yeah, I would do that,
And then take it
because,
to the following supervisor meeting and let you know,
Yeah, I think,
because I would want to, now there are 3 supervisors in the room, there are only 4 of them right now. Although it seems that, I do value the input from this committee, when voting at the supervisor level, so I think I'd like to have this committee give its blessing to it, but I don't see a reason to wait very long to do that.
My point was that I could do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
My issue was that I was not going to take the route that I had formerly taken with the historical preservation language, the AP and everything else, and spend, and tackle it as a concept from start to end through the planning commission, because the last one took 17 months.
I think you should do what we kind of did at the NVO, get the guts of it in, with the understanding that there's going to have to be some lighting stuff and signage and still addressed.
But I
But
can do that in April if you want to put that on your agenda.
I wouldn't even, unless you need to wait that long, I don't think you would need to
if
wait
you
that
say,
long.
Well, I'm thinking your March meeting is going to be full with discussion of the town center, riverfront,
I
cement,
don't think it'll
ponds,
take them
parking.
that long.
But if we meet in February, could you
Well, I
have,
said we could do it in February.
Yeah,
Not
that's-
that you wanted to-
no, that's what I
if
was
you-
thinking,
you
I'm
know,
gonna look
Jeff
at
will
the
chair
schedule.
meeting, that's-
I'm just gonna look at the schedule, that would be, can we change the date?
It's
It's my-
10th of February.
I know, that's my wedding anniversary, I will get in trouble if I have a meeting on
Let me ask you
on
that,
that.
Lisa, do you believe you have some meetings, outside meetings that are necessary
Yes.
before you come? Okay,
I do, and that's why I was suggesting the April meeting.
okay.
All right, well then.
Why don't you get us some, we'll plan on having something to committee members sometime in March,
Okay.
so they can look at it before they come to the meeting, so it'll be, and at that time, you'll have the opportunity for your meetings, and I know some of the meetings.
And the only other thing I would ask the committee to consider, that I would have suggested on the committee, is the current, and I know that this is only an advisory committee, but we have somewhat followed the formal rules, to ask the Board of Supervisors to change a resolution as listing 13 members, because then you need 7 members for a quorum. And we have in the past acted with, that if you didn't have a quorum, we didn't. So I think you're you're down 1, 2, 4, so you're like 9. So now you technically only need 5 for a
What
quorum.
do I have here?
to
1,
consider
2,
that.
3, 4. 11. Did I miss one? Yes, 12.
Well,
Jeff, Fox, Bob, Chip, Gary, Adrian, Mark, Shannon. I can never remember the other place.
Mehmet.
Mehmet. Pam, Hunter, Jim.
And you had Shannon on that? Okay.
Shannon's still on it.
Well, she's,
No.
but Pam technically. is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No,
But
Pam-
yeah, she's on it, but, so,
You shouldn't have.
Could you change it to include non-voting members?
It's up to you guys. Well, what do I recommend?
I mean, especially for people from the planning commission and for Pam they're not here that often, correct?
I don't
And
think
didn't see
Pam
that
should
they
be,
were from
I
the
think
minutes.
we can't have 12, I think we should have 11. I
Make her
think we should put
consultant.
Pam on as a
Advisor.
advisor, non-voting advisor. And that way we would have 11, quorum would be 6. Can you make that recommendation to us, or do we have to do anything?
He's on-
Yeah, why don't we can recommend it.
Okay, right here, okay, I'll make the motion that our committee be 11 voting members, with the exception that Pam Shook will be now changed to a advisory non-voting member.
Second.
And the membership would be, as you described.
Yes, it's Jeff Bukowski, Bill Fobbs, Bob Quintar, Chip White, Gary, Adrian, I'll just go to the first name,
Yeah.
Mark, Shannon,
Yeah.
Malmut, whatever, Hunter and Jeb.
Gone.
Take that.
I don't have somebody realized it yet.
So is there a February meeting? There's not one, right?
No
I think there is none.
Is there a second on that motion?
He seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Quarter of 8, time to leave.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Quarter
So
8.
the March meeting is the
Chair,
9th?
we've been out there in half an hour.
The,
Second Wednesday of the month, right? 'Cause
March
the 9th of
9th.
March is our next meeting.
thank you.
Now you're already fighting for the chair.
No, trust me, I'm not.
I can keep this or you?
That's yours.
Okay.
Take a quick peek.
Anybody not get a copy of this? 'Cause it's-
What is that?
The
It's all the
minutes.
same
Oh,
stuff.
we didn't do the minutes.
Oh, yeah. Gonna read.
Let's reconvene. I move to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Our meeting adjourned. Thank you.
I assume that was a historical name tag.
Yes,
We should put that in the archive.
yeah.
She wants to take it home.
Oh, yeah. So I think we should put wall plaques.
Got
I
an
think we
auction.
should put wall plaques. Yeah, it's the last auction, the signs were the only thing that brought any money.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right.
Sorry, Mr. Christmas.
Lisa, I don't even, I know, me
You're
too.
not, don't tell me that.
I can't, I'm too busy. I just got another case.
You can't just do it for an hour.
It's never an hour.
Well, then just leave it. It would have been an hour last time if you had
Well, that's all.
Hunter, nice to meet
I know,
you.
but we're
I
past
actually
that.
heard positive comments today, too.
From
Residents.
From residents about the food and service, because Tom said he ate there at lunch, he took a meeting there at lunch, and
The tape still on? Was it on?
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna turn that off, yeah.
that recorder.
I just pushed the erase button.